Well, I'm just going to get us started here. Thanks everyone for their patience so far. My name is Chris Morgan. I am the adult programming librarian at the Newburgh Free Library, and we are so happy to have the Small Business Boot Camp back up and running again. We took a little mini break, but we're back with Intro to Small Business Law. I'm going to pass this over because this is a partnership with the City of Newburgh, the Small Business Administration, and the Mid-Hudson Small Business Development Center. And I'm going to pass over to Ellen Fillo from the City of Newburgh.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen Fillo. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Newburgh. And we are, again, as Chris had said, very excited that you're able to join us for this next session, the Small Business Boot Camp. This session was requested by many of the attendees through our last session. We're very excited to have our presenter here. And with that, I'd like to thank our partners, which is the Newburgh Free Library, Small Business Administration, and the Small Business Development Center. And with that, I'm going to pass this along to Miriam with the Small Business Development Center.
Good evening, everyone. We are very excited by the continuation of the Small Business Boot Camp. In the spring, we had 4 sessions, 2 weeks apart. And given the information we received in the surveys, we decided to continue and invite special guests. So tonight we have, well, first off, the Small Business Development Center is where I work. I'm a business advisor there. We provide one-on-one business counseling to new or existing businesses. We are funded by the SBA, which is one of the sponsors tonight at this presentation. And for tonight, we partnered with the City of Newburgh and the Newburgh Free Library to make this event possible. So if you need more information about our organization, you can go to our website, nysbdc.org. There's no fee for our services. And whether you're a startup or just thinking about a business, or you're a veteran business person for 15, 20 years, we have clients of all kinds of business growth and all kinds of industries. And one thing that's unique to New York is that if you have a question that is very specific to your industry, we have business librarians that can work on your behalf and give you the information you need. So that's very unique to our organization. So at the end of this presentation, tonight or tomorrow morning, you'll be getting an email with the PDF of the presentation, so you don't have to take notes, and with the recording, and also a link to a survey, which I really, really encourage you to go. It's just like 4 questions. It takes literally no time, but it gives us a lot of information about what you'd like to see next in this series, and what you liked and what you didn't like. So please, please fill out those surveys. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the chat box. I will monitor the chat box for Gary, but I really encourage you to make an effort to listen to the presentation, because oftentimes, you're listening to a presentation and you get a question, you write it in, and then 2 minutes later, the presenter is answering that question. So wait a little bit. There will be time for Q&A at the end, and you can then ask your questions. We can unmute you. We can have a conversation. So without any further ado, I'm going to present you Gary Schuster, who is an attorney with Jacobowitz and Gubitz LLP in Walden, and he's been there since 2004, but he's now a partner. He has a really wide business practice, legal practice, which includes, businesses, nonprofits, arts and entertainment, copyright, trademarks. The list goes on. And tonight he created a really wonderful presentation that allows you to get at least a good introduction. So without any further ado, Gary, I'm going to stop sharing, and I think you can now share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Nice to see you again. It's been a while. Share my screen. How do I do that? Oh, look at that. Is it working? Can you see my screen? Yes, Ellen's shaking her head, but Ellen is
We see
muted,
it.
so I can't really tell that. Okay, great. Good evening. Hello. Nice to see everybody. Appreciate this opportunity to talk to you all. It's been a long day, hasn't it? It's been a very exciting day here. So Jacobowitz and Gubitz, we are in Walden, as you can see here. We've got about 20 lawyers. We've been around for 50 years. I think this is our 51st year. I have not been here all that time. We have a team that does business and real estate and litigation and municipal and states and wills and trusts and family, divorce. So we cover, most anything anybody in the Hudson Valley needs. We're most active in Orange, Sullivan, Ulster, Dutchess. A lot of us have clients in other places, but that's mostly where our work comes from. And I am on 5 nonprofit boards, which let me tell you is 3 too many. But it is, a large part of my practice. So it's good for me to do that sort of thing. A lot of us here are very active in the community, lots of boards, lots of volunteering, all sorts of things. All right, I as a business attorney, I form a lot of businesses and I buy them and they sell them, and also contracts, leases, employment, taxes, all the things that day-to-day business needs. Before I moved here, because I'm from Queens, I was mostly in the music business. 15 years in music publishing, 8 years in art publishing, copyright, trademark, licensing. So I don't get to do too much of that anymore, but that is in my background as well. Okay, let's dive in here. I'm going to try and go slowly. I talk too fast. Okay. Using business entities. Why do you use a business entity? A corporation, a limited liability company? Well, there's 2 main reasons. One is to manage risk, and the other is to raise money. What kind of risk? Well, there's lots of risk out there in the world. We always think about risk in our business. Somebody gets hurt walking into your place. You have a bakery, they slip and they fall. That's very common, and that can be very expensive. Product liability, the product that you put out into the world hurts somebody, poisons somebody, blows up in their face, explodes, gets them sick, whatever. That's called product liability. Auto accidents, you or your staff, your employees crash into somebody. Employment, a very growing a lot more litigation than there used to be. Wrongful termination, discrimination, age discrimination, sexual discrimination, sexual harassment. There's a lot of claims from employees these days for employers. Cyber risks. So we just in the news this week, right? Some hacker shut down the whole gasoline pipeline. It goes from the Gulf Coast to the Northeast. And so there's huge lines at gas stations. So that's a cyber risk. Ransomware, hacking, exposing personal information. It could be credit card numbers. It could be social security numbers. It could be health information. Recovering from that is very expensive. Laws require you to take certain steps. If you discover you've been hacked, you have to tell all of your customers. There's a number of steps that you have to take, and the estimated cost $250,000 to do these things. That's before they steal your money. That's just to fix whatever's wrong. So this is a growing risk. Credit issues, that's a nice way of saying that you don't pay your bills and you've got people coming after you for money. Infringement of patents, copyrights, and trademarks. Everybody's got a website these days. We've had several cases where somebody appears one day and says, that photograph that's on your homepage, that's my picture, and you owe me $50,000. And so you have to be very careful about the materials that you use, videos, music, text, on your website, in your promotional materials. Make sure you have it properly licensed. Professional malpractice. So that's lawyers, doctors, engineers, architects. Malpractice means you did a bad job and people sue you. So there's all sorts of risks in the world. And so we have these different kinds of entities to help protect you. The most simple kind of, it's not even an entity, it's just you, a sole proprietorship. If you just start to do business without doing anything else, we call you a sole proprietor. And you have unlimited personal liability. That means everything that you own is potentially at risk. If the pizza that you make poisons and kills somebody, and the family sues you for $11 million and wins, you're done. You could lose everything that you own. That's what we mean by unlimited personal liability. I put a line through it because it means don't do it. Don't do it. Do something else. A partnership is when two or more people just start to do business together. That's even worse because as a partner, you are responsible for what your partner does. So if your partner takes the company van and drives through somebody's windshield or window, storefront, you're liable too for what your partner did. That's not even what you did. It's for what your partner did. That's what makes it worse. So we don't like general partnerships. Then there's what we call unincorporated association. That's just a bunch of people. It's sort of a precursor to a nonprofit. It's like a group of people getting together to do something. It's not necessarily a business. Maybe it's to put on a play or to make a park or to do any number of things. But they don't have bylaws. They don't have a corporation. We call that an unincorporated association. All those three things we don't want to do. What you want is a corporation or a limited liability company. We have the C corporation, the S corporation. I'm going to explain all this stuff, just like Miriam said. Hold your questions. I'm going to answer them. I'm also going to talk briefly about benefit corporations, the B Corp, and the not-for-profit corporation. That's a lot of letters. It's annoying, but there it is. So why do you incorporate? You do it because it's a separate legal entity. It's not you. And you put money into it, and that's all the money that you are at risk of losing. And so your house, your car, your savings, those are all isolated and protected. That's why you do it. In New York, at least, there are many different kinds of corporations. We always think of business corporations, but there's actually many kinds: religious, insurance, nonprofit, municipal, banking. The village of Goshen, where I live, is a municipal corporation. The city of Newburgh is a municipal corporation. All of these are separate legal entities. They can own property, they can buy and sell things, they can be sued, they can sue people. So we're going to stick with business corporations because this is a business class. I'll call this the anatomy of a business corporation. You've got, on top, you've got the investors, also known as shareholders, stockholders. They're the owners of the company. They own the shares of stock in the corporation. And they have elections, and they elect the board of directors. And the board of directors are people who manage the company. They're actually the day-to-day managers, the board of directors. They have responsibility to run the company. And they hire or appoint officers. These are individuals. These are people, human beings, who act on behalf of the corporation. You've got the president, the vice president, secretary, treasurer. You can have dozens of them. You can have the second assistant treasurer and so on. These are people authorized to take action on behalf of the corporation. And finally, you have the sort of the rank and file employees or staff. You think of a place like, Microsoft. There's thousands and thousands of employees, millions, literally millions of stockholders. And at the same time, you have what we call close corporations, which is what we have around here in the Hudson Valley. 2, 3, 4 stockholders. You can actually have a corporation with one person in all of these roles. You have a corporation with one person, and they are all of those things. Close corporation, we wouldn't refer to as a sole owner, but when there's 2 or 3 or 4, we call that a close corporation, as opposed to a public corporation. Microsoft, Apple, General Motors, all the companies that are on the stock exchange where you can buy and sell their shares, those are public corporations. So those are the players. Those are the people in a corporation. Okay, the S versus the C. So the big public corporations the Microsofts of the world, those are C corporations. These refer to sections of the Internal Revenue Code. That's why they have these names. And it's a distinction under federal law, not state law. Corporations are created under state law, but the federal tax law governs how they handle their money. So C corporations pay income tax on corporate net income, and then their shareholders pay tax on the dividends they receive. When you buy a share of stock, one of the things that you hope to get is dividends. You hope to get paid. And you'll see in the business newspapers, General Motors paid a dividend of 11 cents a share this month. So if you have 1 million shares, you get 11 cents times 1 million, and that's part of why you own a share of stock. Dividends. S corporation, on the other hand, it's sort of called a disregarded entity. They don't pay a corporate level of tax. It's really not there for tax purposes. All the income is immediately attributed to shareholders. I like to draw pictures. It helps to understand these things. So there's the income, comes into the corporation. Number one, the corporation is taxed on the income. Then you have all those dividends going out the bottom, going out to the shareholders. They get taxed on that too. So the idea is that there's two taxes being paid, one at the corporate level and one at the shareholder level. On the other hand, in the S corporation, that corporation is disregarded. Sometimes it's called a pass-through. And the money is deemed received by the owners immediately, depending on their fractions. We got 5 arrows here. Maybe each person owns 1/5, so they get a fraction of the income. It may not be equal. One guy may have 50%, the other may have 10 and 10 and 10. You don't know. So that's what S and C corporations mean. Most of the corporations that we experience here in the Hudson Valley are these smaller S corporations. There are limits. You can only have, it's either 75 or 100, I can't remember, shareholders. An S corporation cannot have more than that number of shareholders. And there are some other restrictions on who can be an owner of an S corporation. All right, zip it along. So, limited liability company, much newer. Corporations are centuries old. Limited liabilities came to New York in 1979. We were a little late. We wanted to see how other states did it before we chose those aspects of it that we liked, and we made our own LLC law in 1979. They offer the same protection as the corporation, but they're very flexible as to the investment, the profit, the vote, management. In a corporation, if you put in 10% of the money, you get 10% of the shares, you get 10% of the profit, you get 10% of the vote. It's very rigid. In the LLC, it can be much more flexible. There's a great deal of variety, and that makes it useful. Somewhat less formal in operations. You don't necessarily have to have meetings of shareholders and directors and annual reports and so on. And it is the preferred entity for owning real estate. That's a tax reason that I don't think I'm going to get into, but if you're thinking of owning land for your business, you want it in an LLC. So as I said, from my point of view, so I'm the lawyer, I'm not the accountant. From my point of view, the corporation and LLC are pretty much the same. They both protect personal assets. But from accounting perspective, there are differences between them. These are some of the differences. You think about salaries and profits and dividends and health insurance, self-employment tax, and all of this sort of thing. All I can do is point you to that list and say, go find an accountant to explain why it's different, how it's different. And you should, if you're thinking about starting a business, talk to your accountant first about how it's going to operate, who's going to put in the money, what you expect to get out of it, how you expect it to operate, and let your accountant say to you, I think you should have a corporation, I think you should have an LLC, I think you should have a C corporation, an S corporation. When that decision is made, then you come to me and I make it. I think that's the way to go. Okay, the C corporation is preferred if a company wants to go public. If you want to be really big, you have to be a C corporation. The S corporation As I say, you can only have either 75 or 100 shareholders. You can't have millions of shareholders. And they're also, as for the LLCs, they're very mysterious. As I said, there's a lot of flexibility in the LLC. That means they're all different and nobody knows what they are. And you're not going to get big investment in those LLCs because they're just too mysterious. These, what we call institutional investors here, the mutual funds, insurance companies, pension funds, people who invest billions of dollars in companies, you're not going to get that if you're an LLC or an S corporation. So if that's your business plan, you want to have a C corporation. It depends on what you want to do with your business. All right. More managing risk. So the conglomerate. So this is a method of managing risk. So you could have a single corporation that owns a lot of real estate and owns a lot of trucks and has a lot of equipment and has copyrights and patents, and it's all in one entity. And the risk there, if something goes wrong, you'll lose it all. You'll lose all of it. The conglomerate spreads out the risk. So all of these things are meant to be separate corporations or separate LLCs. So maybe there's a piece of land that has a factory on it. Real estate number one, the land is owned by a LLC, and you put a factory on it. Maybe there's a distribution center, and that's real estate number two. It's a separate LLC. If the factory burns down and you lose property number one, you're not at risk of losing property number two because it's in a separate organization, separate entity. And you do the same for your patents, your copyrights. For your trucks, there's a rumor, well, an urban legend that every taxi cab in New York City is owned by a separate corporation. You may own 100 cabs, but you don't put them all in the same corporation because if something goes wrong, you lose all 100 cabs. So you spread it out. I have labor in here. Labor, you can actually lease employees from a separate company. We talked about the risks in employment these days for lawsuits from employees. Maybe you want to make yourself distant from that. The equipment, maybe the machinery is owned, you have a factory and it makes widgets, you've got conveyor belts and whatever, I don't know. You put those into a separate corporation. If it blows up, you don't lose the whole thing. So that's the idea. And there are licenses and contracts and leases. There are contracts with all these companies so that the manufacturing company leases land from the real estate company and the manufacturer licenses the trademark from the trademark owner and so on. It is a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of separate tax returns. It's a lot of, work, but it does reduce risk so that if something blows up in one corner of this conglomerate, the rest of it stays safe. That's what the big boys do with conglomerates. All right. If you have a corporation or an LLC, it is important that you respect the formalities. That means, well, I'm going to show you. If you don't treat it as a separate entity, nobody else will either. If you use it as your personal piggy bank, a court, the judge, somebody sues you for money, will say, well, look, you don't treat it as separate, so we don't have to treat it as separate, so we're coming after your money. So you have to, as they say, respect the formalities. So what does that mean? Separate bank accounts, separate credit cards, separate books and records. Do not pay business debts with personal funds and vice versa. Always use the corporate indicator. There's the Inc. or the Corp or the LLC when you use your name. Here, look at my Jacobitz and Gubitz down there on the bottom, right? We got the LLP in there to show the world that you are incorporated. Now, some people don't like that in marketing materials. They don't, Coca-Cola, it doesn't say Coca-Cola Corporation. It just says Coca-Cola, right? So you can do that. But in the more formal communications, like letters or contracts or invoices, business forms, you should certainly use what we call the corporate indicator. What's next here? Oh, how do you sign your name? So sign letters and contracts showing that you are an agent of the company and you're not doing it yourself. So this is how you would do it. It could be on the bottom of a letter or it could be on the bottom of a contract. So the person, the entity that's signing the letter is XYZ Corporation, but it's by Jane in her capacity as the president. And that's the model that you should use. That shows that you're acting through the corporation, reducing the risk of getting um, personally liable for whatever is at stake there. All right, what's next? Other things to think about with corporations and LLCs. Okay, I actually have a list of 27 things. I'm only going to do a few of them here. And largely this is for when you have somebody else that you're working with. If you're solo, this is not a problem because you do what you want. But when you have more than one person, it becomes much more complicated, much more quickly. So who has to put in the money? And what happens when you need more money? So we form a corporation, we're going to build a house. We're going to build one house and we're going to sell it. Okay, it's January, the county tax bill has come in. We need money in the corporation to pay the county tax bill. We have what we call a call for additional capital. And you say to all the shareholders, okay, we need $1,000 from each one of you so we can pay the tax. And you have to do it. And the question is, what if you don't do it? This is the question with all of these things. So you have an obligation. What if you don't? What are the consequences of failing to do it? That's something that should be written into your paperwork. In the LLC, we've often had situations where there's one person or maybe two people who have the money and the other person is the talent or the labor. So the labor person isn't required to put in money. Only the money person is required to put in money. You can do that. You just want to make sure it's clear and everybody understands it. The fights that we get around here for business disputes are very often because people don't talk to each other and people don't think about it. I am the outside sales guy. No, you're supposed to be in here with me fixing the truck. I'm the money guy. No, you're supposed to be in here with me cutting the hair. People don't have those conversations, and of course they need to. All right, securities laws. Okay, so that's a big topic. The idea is that when you're selling shares of stock or interests in a limited liability company, those are called securities, equities. And there's a lot of laws, federal and state laws about advertising and soliciting, and it's complicated, it's expensive. And most of the smaller organizations don't do it. The close ones that we have around here, there's exclusions for when you sell those equities to your circle of family and friends, people that you know for a long time. And most of what happens around here comes within that exemption, circle of family and friends. But if you do think that you want to go out and get money from strangers, you have to be aware of the securities laws and come to somebody like me before you do anything. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Management. So 2 people, 2 votes. What happens if, I want red and you want green? What do we do? So how do you resolve a deadlock? There's various mechanisms for that. Some of them work, sometimes they don't work. The nuclear option is that you have to sell the business, shut it down. Hopefully there's other ways. For example, we've got a client, they're brother and sister. It's the grandfather's business and it went to the father and now it's the brother and sister. And they've developed their little specialties. So the guy is sort of the finance guy and the manufacturing production guy. And the sister is in with design and marketing. So she's more left brain and he's more right brain, or maybe I got that backwards. I don't know. So they say, we're going to decide everything together, but if it's a finance thing, the brother's decision will prevail. And if it's a marketing thing, then the sister's decision will prevail. And that's one way that they resolve that. And it could be other things. Often it's the one with the money who will decide, but not always. Work obligations. So I talked about that, I expect you to show up in the shop every day and work 40 hours a week, or no, I'm the outside salesperson or what have you. Or maybe I'm just the money person. I don't have to work at all. So if that is discussed, it should be discussed ahead of time. and it should be written down. Employment and self-employment tax. The only thing I'll say about this is that nobody likes unpleasant surprises. So if you're in business for a year and you go do your taxes and suddenly your accountant says, by the way, you owe $27,000 in self-employment tax, and your head explodes, you don't want that. You want to know what it's going to be before you really get started. So planning. Okay. Buy, sell. So that means what happens when one of the owners gets hit by a bus or becomes disabled or decides he doesn't want to do it anymore or wants to retire? How do you exit the business? And there's just all sorts of variations and formulas, and basically, one person has to buy out the other person. And that raises a lot of questions. First of all, what's the purchase price? How much is the business worth? How do you pay it? Do I pay it in lump sum, or can I pay it over 5 years? What happens if I pay a little bit and then I stop paying you? These contracts can be, 10 pages long. So buy, sell. It's kind of like a will for a business. And we have the same reluctance. A lot of people don't want to do their wills. By the way, you should absolutely have a will. And a lot of people don't want to do this either, but you should. Exit planning. Now, to me, that means not just retirement, but I was talking about whether you want to sell, whether you want to go public, right? Whether you want to have millions of shareholders, or maybe you want to sell to Microsoft or Google, or maybe you want to sell it to a bigger fish in your business, or maybe you don't want to exit at all and you want to do it. I love baking cakes, and this is what I want to do every day. I have no plans to leave. So that can affect a lot of things. We sometimes find, in the ordinary course of business, people want to pay less tax. And so they find ways, legal ways, to reduce their income and pay less tax. But when it comes time to sell, it kind of comes back to bite them, because their tax returns show that they made a relatively small amount of money. And so why should somebody give you a lot of money? Because you don't really bring in that much. So if you do have an idea that I want to leave in the next 3 or 5 years, you might change the way you do your taxes so that you show a bigger income and that you can get a bigger purchase price. All perfectly legal, frequently, not always, but usually. So that's part of exit planning. We say that a lot around here. Think ahead, start early. The earlier you start, the more options you have, the more time you have to set things up. Talking to a lady yesterday, running a successful business, and she's starting to think about, I want to transfer this business to my assistant. And one of the things you do is you have like a stock option plan, and you say, okay, I'm going to give you 5% of the business next year. And I'm going to give you 5% of the year after that. Well, you can see that this is a 20-year process before the person gets 100%. So it takes time, right? And it may not be those figures. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's whatever. But it can take a lot of years. I promise you, it takes a year to plan it for the the accountant and the lawyer, just to plan that. And then you implement it. That takes several years. So think ahead, plan ahead. Okay. Now, another protection against risk, of course, is insurance. And I've had people say, well, if I just buy a ton of insurance, I don't need to incorporate. And I say, well, you might be right. So there's lots of different kinds of insurance. People have a tendency to say, I got insurance, but that's not enough, because insurance is very specific. And if you have auto insurance, but you become disabled, the auto insurance doesn't do you any good. And if you have professional malpractice insurance, but somebody slips and falls on your premises, that doesn't do you any good. So the insurance is only going to respond. We say the insurance responds to the accident or to the claim, The insurance is only going to respond to that specific type of claim. So you might need any or all or many of these. Commercial general liability is what every storefront has. My office. This is for when you have a business premises, people slip and fall. Errors and omissions. You do bad work or you make a mistake, which is very much like professional malpractice, except it's not in the professions. The professions in New York is very specific. The Department of Education has an Office of the Professions, which covers medicine, architecture, law, engineering, landscape design, believe it or not. So there are a number of professions. And that's what we mean. The New York State Department of Education issues a license to practice that profession. Automobiles, workers' comp, fidelity, that means crime, embezzlement. Your bookkeeper runs off with your money. Health insurance, we're all familiar with that. The cyber, we talked about that before. Media, which is close to my heart, infringement for copyright, trademark, privacy defamation. Life insurance is comes in too many variations, but useful in many ways. People don't really use insurance as much as they could. There's some very creative and clever ways of using insurance, and not every insurance agent knows all those ways, but some of them are really quite ingenious, I think. Disability, what always intrigues me about disability is, for instance, God forbid, I lost my hand. If I lost my hand, I could still be a lawyer because I talk all day. But if I was a basketball player and I lost my hand, I'd be out of work, or a carpenter, or a plumber, or what have you. So disability means different things in different businesses, and you need to think about what it means to you. We have a case with a dentist who spent 30 years leaning over, poking his arm into people's mouths, and his hand went numb. The nerves, he couldn't grip. And by the way, we had a fight with the insurance company because they're your friend until they're not. And he did have disability coverage, and he is getting paid, but it was a struggle. Business interruption. So this is hot this year because of COVID. Lots and lots of claims that COVID interrupted my business, and most of them are losing because when you read the fine print, as you must, it has to be a physical intrusion into your business. Flood, collapse of a building, somebody drove through the front of your store. There has to be some physical injury to your property. The fact that there's a pandemic out in the world and nobody showed up wasn't enough, didn't work. So business interruption doesn't mean what people hoped it meant. Directors and officers, that protects directors and officers of nonprofits primarily if they are sued for doing something in the course of serving on their board. An umbrella is interesting. It's like it sounds, sits on top of everything else. So if you've got $100,000 in media insurance and you get sued for $300,000, the insurance company will pay all the $100,000, but you're still on the hook for $200,000. But if you have umbrella, that will kick in and cover the rest. So umbrella is very nice to have. As it says, it responds when the other ones run out, and it's also relatively inexpensive. You can get a lot of umbrella coverage for relatively little money, and so that's definitely worth looking at. Oh, that was a mouthful about insurance. Oh, there's more. Premium, that's what you pay for the insurance. Proceeds, what the insurance pays you if something happens. The deductible, the amount you have to pay. So you get into a car crash, they're going to say, okay, you have to pay the first $1,000 and we're going to pay all the rest. That's the deductible. The limit, the maximum amount that they will be paid. So we say we're going to pay $1 million per incident, or annual aggregate, no more than $3 million per year. That's the sort of thing you'll see. Claims made versus occurrence. I have to look this up every time. It is not something I remember. Claims made covers regardless of when the event occurred. an occurrence will cover only if you had insurance at the time that the event occurred. So you gotta look at these things. An endorsement. A lot of policies come with endorsements. Like on homeowners, you might have a jewelry endorsement. You might have a snowmobile endorsement. So they're adding a little extra coverage. An additional insured. You hear that a lot. And this is also not properly understood in many ways. So I have I rent a store, and I have a landlord, and I have insurance for my personal property, and or fire insurance, and the landlord says I have to be an additional insured. Fine. Doesn't almost never costs anything more to put an additional insured on your policy, but it doesn't get you what you don't get paid. So you really need to the additional insured doesn't necessarily get paid. They get defended, but they don't get paid. So if you are a landlord, or if you're asking somebody to make you the additional insured, ask questions and make sure you're going to get what you want. You know, if this thing comes crashing to the ground, am I going to get paid? Duty to defend. This is the thing about insurance. This is why you do it. They're going to hire their lawyer. If something happens, you don't have to come to me. I often get, calls. Oh, somebody fell in my store. I need you to defend me. No, you have an insurance company. It's their job to defend you. That's why you pay all those premiums. The duty to defend. So that's important. That's what you're paying for. And so should something happen to you, look at your homeowner's insurance. Look at your store insurance. Look at your any insurance you have, your auto insurance. See if there's some coverage there for whatever may have happened to you. All right, tips. Yes, agents. Yeah, there's a lot of insurance agents out there, but really there's a very small market. There's only so many. They're all like retailers, and they're buying wholesale and they're selling retailers, and there aren't that many wholesalers out there. They're all going to the same place. The underwriters, I forget the phrase, but they're all going to the same place for their policies. They shop around. They look in the market. Who's going to insure this? You get some weird requests. Like, I don't know. I have a skydiving company. Like, who's going to insure that? Well, not many people are going to insure it, but they're out there. So you got to go find them. Find an agent who understands your business and its risk, right? So you have a restaurant. Well, there's a lot of, everybody knows what those risks are. What if I have a yoga studio? What if I'm running a skydiving business? What if I train dogs? These are all different businesses with different risks, and you want an agent who's going to understand your risks. And there it says, don't buy too much, don't buy too little. You need the right insurance. This is important. Insurance will never cover your intentional bad acts. If you're a crook, if you lie, cheat, or steal, if you do something intentionally, insurance will not cover you. Okay, prompt notice. So there you go, at the very bottom. After making a claim, you will find out they are not your friend. They don't want to pay. One of the ways they get out of paying is to say, you didn't tell us on time. You have an obligation to inform your insurance company as soon as you become aware of some circumstance that could lead to a claim. Okay, I was in the store and this lady fell over and cracked her head and she was bleeding. You better tell your insurance company right away. That lady may or may not sue, but if you let 6 months go by and the lady sues and you go to the insurance company, say, you should have told me 5 months ago, and they will get out of paying you. So you don't want that to happen. Okay. There are also lawsuits forcing the insurance company to pay because they refuse coverage, and then you have a fight. We get those too. That's what happened with my dentist, the disabled dentist. We had a fight with those guys. Okay, so I talked about having partners in a business and the exit and the buy-sell, right? So you and I, we have a great business. It's a $10 million business. It's worth a lot of money, and I dropped dead. And now you need to buy my interest from my wife for $5 million. And I promised me she's going to hold you to the $5 million. So where on earth are you supposed to come up with that $5 million? Well, if we had insurance on each other, the insurance would pay it. And upon my death, you would get $5 million and you would give it to my wife, and she would give you my interest in the company, and that would be it. Of course, there are complications and variations, but that's basically it. And it's good. So yeah, you ought to do that. By contract, in one dies. Okay, in a corporation, we have what's called a shareholder agreement. In the limited liability company, we call it an operating agreement or the buy-sell agreement. Okay, so that's one of the many uses of term life insurance. Raising money. Okay, so I did talk about securities. That's the other purpose of forming an entity, is to get money from strangers, to sell shares in the company, and to raise money. As I said, beware of the federal and state securities laws. Registration procedure, there you go. The Federal Securities Exchange Commission, New York State Attorney General. Call a lawyer. I said all of this already. Okay. All right, well, that's it for the business corporation and LLC. This is kind of how Miriam and I met, actually, in the world of benefit corporations, which was introduced in New York about 10 years ago. It has not really taken off in New York, although it is a movement throughout the world, and I think it's growing. But as always, New York made it difficult and complicated. It's easier in other places. So a benefit corporation, first of all, it is a business corporation. There was a lot of confusion. Is this a nonprofit? What is this thing? No, it is a business corporation. It was created to solve a problem. And the problem was that some companies like Ben & Jerry's or Patagonia or Paul Newman's took a lot of their profits and gave them to good causes, and wanted to make the world a better place. And some of the shareholders of those companies said, what are you doing? Those are my dividends. I invested in you to earn dividends, and you're taking my profit and you're giving it to strangers. I didn't invest for that. Give me my damn dividends. And some of them got sued and lost. And a business corporation is made to pay dividends to shareholders. That was made very clear in the law. So they created this thing called a benefit corporation. And a benefit corporation can use, in fact, it must use some of its profit for public benefit. And in New York, there is this definition of what is a public benefit: a material positive impact on society and the environment taken as a whole, assessed against the third-party standard from the business and operations of a benefit corporation. Blah, blah, blah. How do you make a benefit corporation? You do it just like another corporation, except you say this business shall be a benefit corporation. That's all it takes. But then there's a lot of rules you have to follow. So there has to be a general public benefit, and you can also have a specific public benefit. A corporation can choose to have a specific public benefit, like we're going to use less electricity or less paper or whatever. I'm going to get into some of these definitions here. Well, the important thing here is assessed against a third-party standard. What does that mean? It means, once again, this was meant to solve a problem. A lot of companies marketed themselves as being environmentally conscious and good citizens, when in fact they were not. And so the idea is we're not going to allow these companies to judge themselves. We're going to have a third party monitor them and assess them. And that third party will tell us if they are behaving correctly and doing what they say they're going to do. B-Lab is one of these. There are several. There are new obligations on the directors of benefit corporations. They must consider these 7 things when considering a corporate action. And this is supposedly good corporate citizenship. You have to think about whether the corporate action will allow you to accomplish your benefits. Is it good for your shareholders? Is it good for your employees? Is it good for your customers? Is it good for the community? Is it good for the local and global environment? You can see this is not what typical business corporations think about, but this is what B corporations have to think about. Short-term and long-term interest, including the possibility that its interest may be best served by continued independence. What does that mean? That means you don't want any hostile takeovers. For instance, if you are a nice environmental company and your shares are trading at $10 a share and somebody comes along to offer $20 a share in a hostile takeover, you can fight that by saying, you know what, our shareholders are not going to get that money, but we're going to stay independent, and it's best for the world that we do, that we fight off this hostile takeover. That's what that's about. Okay, something else you have to do as a B Corp is file an annual benefit report. You have to tell the world what your goals were and how you did in meeting them. You have to disclose the compensation paid to the directors during the year. That's pretty intrusive. No, a lot of people don't like that. You have to disclose the name of every person who owns 5% or more of company shares. Public companies have to do this sort of thing. Big corporations, the C corporations on the stock exchange, but all the other corporations do not. So this is a lot of disclosure that a lot of people are not comfortable with, which I think is one of the reasons it's not happening in New York all that much. Other states don't require this. And that's it for benefit corporation. Now we have nonprofits. Everyone's familiar with the charities, 501c3. But there's actually more than 20 of these 501Cs. Some of them are the 4s and the 6s and the 7s, the social welfare, business leagues, chamber of commerce, hunting club, fishing club. Donations and contributions are only tax deductible if they're given to charities. So if you gave money to a hunting club, that would not be tax deductible. If you gave money to a homeowners association or a chamber of commerce, that is not a tax deductible charitable contribution. This annoys people. Business plans. Yes, nonprofits need them too. Nonprofits need to earn more money than they spend, or they're going out of business, just like another business, any other business. So they need a business plan. Where's the money going to come from? Can the nonprofit earn what is needed to sustain? If not, then you look for subsidies through charitable contributions or grants. There's a lot of businesses that can be either. There's nonprofit theaters and for-profit theaters, nonprofit colleges and for-profit colleges, nonprofit hospitals, for-profit hospitals. It's not the activity, it's the structure. All right, what's next? Two kinds of charities. So first we have charities and non-charities. 501c3s are charities, the other ones are not charities. Then within charities, we have the public charities on the left. These are the ones you're all familiar with, the United Way and the Red Cross and St. Jude's and the homeless shelters and the dog pounds, animal shelters and all that sort of thing. They're the ones who do the charitable work, and they collect a lot of money from a lot of people. Then you have private foundations, and this is where one person or maybe a family has an enormous amount of money, and they put it into a foundation, and that money, that foundation gives money out to the public charities. So you have the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. They don't actually do the work. They fund the work. They give it to the public charities. Okay. How do you form a nonprofit in New York? Don't do it. There's enough nonprofits. You have to have a charitable purpose. You have to have 3 people on the board of directors. You can certainly have more, but you can't have less. You have to figure out who are your officers. Members, are your members voting members or not? You have to have a bylaws and a conflict of interest policy. Every corporation that is formed is presumed to be a business corporation unless you go to the IRS and ask to be recognized as tax exempt. And you do that using Form 1023. And it's a 28-page form. It's quite a burden, But if you're going to earn less than $50,000 a year for 3 years, you can use the easy form, which is only 3 pages, which is much better. You also have to register in New York with what's called the Charities Bureau. That is within the Department of, it's within the Attorney General's office. And you have to file tax returns, even though you have no tax to pay. They still want to hear from you. They want to see what you're doing. And you have to file an annual tax return with the state and the feds. And if you're a large organization, which generally means revenues of $1 million or more, you have to have full-blown audits, which are pretty expensive, and also a whistleblower policy for your employees if they want to expose wrongdoing within the organization. They want to protect the whistleblowers. Charities are exempt from federal and state income tax, but they can be taxed on what's called unrelated business income. So sometimes charities will have a little side business, or maybe they're selling coats, or who knows what. If the IRS decides that their business activity is not related to their tax exempt purpose, they may have to pay tax, income tax. Charities are also exempt from New York State sales tax. Now that's a nice thing. You go to Lowe's to buy a bunch of lumber. You go to Staples to buy a fax machine or something. You don't have to pay sales tax, so that's very nice. But there's an application for that. You have to apply for it. Also, the New York State Corporation Franchise Tax. Once again, you have to apply. And if you own land, if you're like a hospital or university, a religious organization, you can be exempt from the state real property tax. That's something we do a lot of around here, representing the landowners. We also represent the tax assessors. We're on both sides, but not in the same place. So those are some of the benefits of being a not-for-profit. Okay. We're just going to keep going. Okay, next topic, last topic. Contracts. Seems that's what I do all day long. Legally enforceable agreements between parties. Some writing is always the best. It need not be formal. You're going to go to court. You always have to think about the judge. Think about the judge. You got to tell your story to the judge. Your Honor, this guy screwed me. He said he was going to do this, and he didn't. And the judge is going to say, show me. Where's the piece of paper that says he was going to do this? You got no paper, you're out of luck. So you got to have it in writing. And it doesn't have to be fancy, and it doesn't have to be formal. It could even be an exchange of emails. I'm going to paint your house on Thursday, and you're going to give me $1,000. Okay. Could be that simple. Save them. You got to have them. I hate texting. Can't print a text. Can't save a text. I don't like it. So emails are better. And an invoice. So a lot of, if you go to Best Buy or something and you buy a refrigerator, the invoice, the receipt's got all this language on the back. That's all the terms and conditions of sale. And that will work. Documentation is very important. Okay, I said that already. So put it on a piece of paper and save it and keep it. Okay. What are the essential elements? So one thing is, who is the party? This goes back to the question about the corporation. If you have a corporation, you want the corporation to be the party, and you want to sign the document the way I showed you with the title and the by. And you don't want to be personally responsible. You want to make sure that your corporation is responsible. And then on the other side, I always ask, are you a corporation? Are you an LLC? People are very fast and loose with their names. We don't like that. We want to know who we're dealing with. We want to see the paperwork. We want to look them up. Somebody tells me they have a corporation. I go online. New York State has a database of all the corporations. I look for it. I want to see if the address is right. I want to see if the name is the same guy that I'm talking to. I want to see if they're still in good standing. So we check out the other side too. A lot of people use assumed names. Johnny's Pizza. I'm Johnny's Pizza. Well, who on earth is Johnny's Pizza? Okay, who are those people? What else? Subject matters, the specific goods or services to be provided. Right. I'm going to paint your house at 35 Orange Avenue. I'm going to do it before June 1st. Okay, that's not bad. You know, I know what it's about. I'm going to pay you X dollars. Payment terms. I got to pay you all up front. I can pay you over 5 years. I have a promissory note. I can pay you $100 a month for 10 months, whatever it might be. What are the deliverables? So this can get crazy. So some of my clients are like, they develop websites with all sorts of e-commerce and interactive this and that, and describing these things is torture. Be specific so you can object if it's not delivered properly. If they give you something and it's not what you want, you have to be able to go back to the paper and say, no, it was supposed to be purple, and this is red, and I want purple. And you can argue about it. If it's not in writing, you got nothing. Deliverables. Depends on your business. It's worth being specific. Deadlines. Generally, the law is a little flexible. It's like, I have a reasonable time in which to deliver whatever I'm supposed to deliver. If you need a firm date, you gotta put it there. I was about to tell a story about the deliverables. I wonder if it's in the next slide. Maybe not. No. I recently helped somebody sell a restaurant, and we always attach a list at the back of the specific assets that are being sold. I got 3 ovens, and I got 12 tables and chairs, and I got a TV, and I got a cash register, and all these things. And I want make and model number. And I say, you don't have to go crazy. I don't want you to count every fork and knife and spoon. But for bigger things, it's got to be on the list. And so 10 days ago, I got a call from the lady. She said, this guy walked into my restaurant and said, that microwave there, that's mine. I'm taking it. And I said, was it on the list? And she said, no, it wasn't on the list. She didn't make the right list. She didn't put it on the piece of paper. So now she doesn't have a microwave. So it's work, but you got to make the list. Otherwise, that sort of thing can happen to you. All right. Style. By the way, Miriam, I added this phrase after our conversation earlier today. So I will send you this new PowerPoint. Right to be understood, not to show off how smart you are, or to think, or because it has to be legal. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be very plain and straightforward. And it just needs to be understood and clear. It's often useful to define some terms. I'll show you in a second. Sometimes you see words with capital letters, right? Capital letters. Those are defined terms. A lawyer who's looking at a contract, some people just put capitals, and it's like, well, why? It means that it's been defined somewhere in the contract. I'll show you in a second. If it's not a defined term, don't make it a capital. Use words and phrases consistently. It can be boring, but it avoids uncertainty. If we're a contractor, say workshop, 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 and then suddenly I say class instead of workshop, well, do I mean the same thing or do I mean something different? It raises questions. So use the same word all the time. It is boring, but it avoids uncertainty. Make it easy to read. Use space, paragraphs, page numbers, headings, and the whereas. Okay, I'm going to show you what all this means. The factual background. Here we go. So the names have been changed. I did not work for Holly Golightly or Lois Lane. But here, Salon, Gotham Inc., A New York corporation having an address for notices, blah, 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 blah. Company, that's the company. That's what I mean by company. And every time you see company with a capital C, that's what I'm talking about. And every time I say buyer with a capital B, I'm talking about Holly Golightly, who resides here. And that's what I mean by defining a term. And sometimes it can be a very complicated concept. It's like a contract that you and I signed, and that's the 2001 contract. And you may have 4 contracts that you're talking about. So we say, okay, I'm talking about the 2001 contract, not the 2003 contract. If you define it, you don't have to repeat the definition over and over and over again. Okay. The whereas. So this tells the story. This is the factual background. Whereas the parties are all the shareholders of the company. Seller wants to sell, buyer wants to buy, no stock certificates were ever prepared. Once again, we're thinking about the judge. We're thinking about the jury. We're going to tell them what's going on here so they understand the scenario. And then we have all these promises below. Number 1, number 2, this is where you tell the story. I'm going to do this and you're going to do this. I'm going to sell you my shares. You're going to pay me money. I'm going to change the lease and all the different things that have to happen. You see the numbers, right? Paragraph 2, it's nice and easy to talk about paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 is about the purchase price. It makes it easy to read. You don't want people to have to work too hard. You really do have to spoon feed people with these things. And it's not always you and the other side. It's going to be the lawyer for the other side. It's going to be the judge. Which is not to say sometimes a little ambiguity and difficulty is what you want. That can happen. But usually I aim for this sort of thing. Okay. Some boilerplate, some things that should be in your forms. There's a bunch of things that are very helpful, and you should put them in your standard forms. New York law applies. You want to say that New York law applies. You don't want to be, California, Ohio, whatever. You don't know what those laws are. I don't know what those laws are. If you had a contract that said Ohio law applies, I got to tell you, I don't know what that is, and I can't help you. I would send you to an Ohio lawyer. Okay, venue. That means where do these disputes get resolved? Orange County, New York. All disputes arising under this contract will be adjudicated in the courts of Orange County, New York. You don't want to be dragged to Florida. You don't want to be dragged to California or Massachusetts. So your contract should say all disputes will take place, will be resolved in Orange County, New York, and New York law applies. So this is your home territory. Saves you a lot of money. The prevailing party in a legal action is entitled to attorney's fees and costs. That is not the default rule. My wife still can't believe that. What do you mean? No, it is the exception rather than the rule. You have to put it in the contract if you want that to happen. If you want to get attorney's fees after you prevail in a lawsuit. And I don't do this reflexively. I think about who's more likely to sue who in this scenario. And sometimes it's my guy who's more likely to get sued. And so I would not put this in. So you have to, don't just do it. You got to give it some thought. Charge money for bounced checks, man. It's like $50 or $75 now. Charge money for late payments. You won't get it if it's not in the contract. If it's not in the contract, you won't get it. Say what the fee is going to be. And it's not just bounced checks anymore. It could be rejected credit cards or a Venmo didn't work or whatever. There's a lot of payment methods out there these days. The thing about interest is that there is a legal rate of interest. I believe it's 9%. I can't hold me to it. But we always say we're going to charge you 9% a year, but in no event more than the legal rate of interest. You have to always add that sentence because if you charge too much, you can lose everything, and you might even be penalized. So that sentence is important. A time limit for complaining about the goods and services delivered. you've got 30 days to come back to me. Otherwise, I don't want to hear from you. Or 10 days or whatever it might be. Put that in your contract. And if I do, limit the damages. If I did something wrong, you'll see this in all sorts of website terms of use and so on. The maximum amount we have to pay you is whatever you paid us. I'm going to refund your money. That's the most you can ever get out of me. So this is a bunch of very useful boilerplate. The thing here about attorney's fees, when somebody comes to us and complains and says, I want to sue somebody or I got screwed, this is the first thing we look at. Who's paying the lawyers? Is there a provision here for lawyers' fees? So it's of interest to us. All right, what else? Oh, there you go. What do you know? Okay.
Mary, thank you so much. This was a chock full presentation. I'm sure people's heads are spinning right now. But I'm sure some of you have questions and you can either raise your hand or I think we don't have a hand raiser. You can put your question in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask directly. It's really up to you. Somebody says, excellent presentation. Thank you, Evelyn.
Nope. It's not my first time.
Been there, done that.
Thank you.
Even I learned a few things. So
Okay.
It's always good to have these presentations. Always good. We have a hand
Oh,
raised.
look, it's a hand.
Yeah, I just don't know who that is. I know it's a clap. It
One
says-
Cheng, it says. Be nice to see everybody. Oh, well.
It pays to wait. Answered all my questions at the end. Awesome, Edward. I'm glad that that happened. But if anyone's questions were not answered in the presentation, or something is not clear or confusing, or you'd want a little more details or an example to better illustrate, please, please don't be shy.
Gary, this is Ellen with the City of Newburgh. Is there anything that I have a small business page on our website. Is there anything that you can provide or, something, maybe your presentation or something that I can put out there as resources for people or references or something that would be helpful? This was a really great presentation.
Maybe.
Okay. I know that's like a lot to ask. Just trying to think about how to give people, like, if someone was like, oh, what was that about corporations? The best way to maybe, just provide this basic.
The fear is that people run with these things and don't quite do it right. We get a lot. We make, I don't know, we must make 10 corporations a week or LLCs around here. And then people come to us with their own homemade ones, LegalZoom or what have you. And we spend a lot of time fixing things. So we are reluctant to have people run off and do things, which is why we kind of limit.
As a business advisor, I say do it once and do it right. And if you're not an expert at it, get someone who is. And a lot of times, people say, oh, I can just file my S Corp, it's $250. And then, they're missing half of the paperwork, or they're doing an LLC and they didn't publish any announcements, and they've been doing business. They have a business, but they have no business. So there's a question here. Sorry. What are you going to say?
I was going to say there's a couple of questions here. So
yes.
Let's see. Are there new legal guidelines that protect business owners when we market using social media? No. There are laws that protect the websites, the hosts, the Facebooks of the world. They're protected. I guess I'd want to know, protect you from what? Libel and defamation never went away. So I guess I'd like to know what kind of threat you're thinking about, because nothing pops to mind immediately.
Hi, Gary. I was thinking more along the lines of e-commerce. When you sell your products or services on social media using e-commerce platforms, your Shopify's, Etsy's, and things like that. You use Facebook for your marketing as a marketing tool.
Right.
Do you get insulated in the same manner you would if you put something in the Chronicle?
Well, certainly those websites have their own terms of use, which probably do provide some protection to the sellers. Unfortunately, that means you have to read it, which is a terrible thing to have to do. And you might want to add your own. So I would say they're mostly interested in protecting themselves, not you. And their terms of use probably would not offer you much protection. And it's the same things I talked about in the boilerplate section: New York law, Orange County venue, attorney's fees, 30 days to complain. That's what you want. There are a lot of other warranties. I didn't really get into it. Depending on what you're selling, that can become a pretty sizable topic. But I wouldn't say they're new. I would say they're just transported to a different medium. It's the same old protections, just on a website instead of on a piece of paper. I see here, can I get into more about the LLC versus the S Corp? And the answer is no. I'm going to send you to your accountant because I don't know those differences well enough. So sorry, I'm punting on that one. I have an Airbnb. I'm creating an LLC. What other type of insurance should I get? Oh my gosh. Well, you certainly need commercial general. This makes me nervous. My wife wants to turn my house into an Airbnb. Hello, I live there.
I usually refer, if I don't mind, I'll answer that one. I usually refer folks to a broker, an insurance broker, not an agent. A broker has many companies they can pull from, and they have these, buckets. You have an Airbnb. Well, you have these different companies that can provide insurance, and they'll hopefully try to give you the best coverage for your risk. But definitely, creating an LLC is another layer, but not all of it.
Yeah, I worry about zoning and so on, whether that's a legal use of a residence. A lot of municipalities allow it, but a lot of municipalities don't allow it. And being in violation of your local zoning could nullify your insurance. So take some digging. Good day. You'll be expanding your LLC from New York to Georgia. I'd like to know the right way of getting this done. Well, an LLC can operate all over the world. It happens to be based in New York and to New York from Atlanta. I got that backwards. New York does require what we call foreign. Domestic means you're in New York, and foreign could be Pennsylvania or Connecticut. What we call foreign entities have to register in New York to be authorized to do business in New York. And then you have to comply with all the local laws. So the Department of State is the website, New York State Department of State, and there would be some paperwork there for a foreign entity to be authorized to do business in New York. It's probably 2 pages long. It's not a big piece of paper. And that would be the way of doing that. Other things are banks and leases and warehousing and employees. I mean, there's a lot of that. But just from the entity point of view, that's what you need to do. And then you'll get a tax bill from New York. Let's see the next one. Great presentation. Thank you. Do I do trademarks? I certainly do. I registered trademarks. I'm not sure what you mean by track them. They are renewable. You have to file a piece of, assuming you get it, in 5 years, you have to certify that you're still using it. And at the 10-year mark, you renew it, and you can renew it for 10 years thereafter, perpetually, theoretically. And we don't want to do that. There's a lot of liability in missing a deadline. So we tell our clients, we are not tracking your deadlines. You have to do that. So
tracking it meant actually, do you make sure no one's infringing or using it?
oh no, certainly not. That's a big business. Now trademarks are great business. I sometimes think I should have done that, taken a left turn 30 years ago. In the major cities, there are firms that do nothing but trademark all day long, and they will. It's all computerized. It's like spiders. They're looking. They're searching for the trademarks, and they'll go after you. We're just a little bunch of country lawyers here. So no. I was going to go another direction about searching. If you're thinking of a trademark, I will say this. Branding is very hard. I think branding is very hard. Thinking of a brand, a name that hasn't been used before, and with an image that hasn't been used before, it's very difficult. And there are search firms out there in the world that will search for your proposed trademark. It's under $200. You get 400 pages of report. They search websites and phone books and directories and just all sorts of things. And they will show you what there is that's close to your proposed trademark, either what we call a direct hit. I want to use Apple for cell phones, or what's something that's close. It's Apple, but it's not cell phones. It's something different. I've had cases where people come to me, paid a marketing person to come up with a brand and a label and packaging and colors and font and all that. And they say, okay, Gary, look what my marketing person, go register it for me. I said, well, let's take it. Somebody got that. The marketing person didn't search. And that's a little outrageous. So it's very easy and cheap and fast to get a trademark search done, and well worth doing before you invest in inventory and graphics and so on. That was only the first question. Does E&O insurance cover a fair housing lawsuit? I don't know, and that sounds like a long story, and I'm not going there. Did you set up the status for an LLC to be able to file taxes as an S corporation? An LLC can be taxed every possible way. It's extremely flexible. As I said, it could be a C corporation. It could be an S corporation. It could be a partnership. LLCs are extremely flexible, and you can do whatever your accountant suggests. Errors and omissions insurance cover for, I don't want to dismiss it that quickly. I mean, I assume that you're somebody, there's a board of directors of some sort in a housing project or housing development, and there's a claim against them. And first of all, you have to, the lawsuit would be against the corporation, and the corporation has its own insurance. I just can't answer that question. There's too many unknowns here. Oh, is that it? That's another thank you. So that's a thank you. Ellen, what can we put on your website? I'll give that some thought. Other than my name and address, right? Something more than that.
Gary, thank you so much.
Thank you for asking, Miriam.
You're very welcome, and we'll be in touch. And everyone who's still listening, please answer the survey. And if you have any thoughts of other types of presentation you'd like to have, please, there's a space for that. And that's really how we got to invite Gary, because people were asking, many people asked about the same thing. So we're like, ooh, let's get an attorney. And I know exactly who to ask. So please do answer that survey and you'll get a copy of this presentation.
I
And
have to send you the updated one.
yes, I'll send you the updated one. And
Okay.
then a copy of the recording. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great evening.
Oh, it's my Zoom, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to hang up on
Thanks
everyone.
everyone for attending.
Thank you. So Chris, I'm going to send you the updated document first thing tomorrow morning, okay?
All right, yep. Then I'll get the follow-up email out to everyone with all that stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.